and gentlemen, today I wish to speak to you about a topic that is at once simple and profound: silence. Now, when I say silence, I don't mean the passive, inattentive silence of boredom or indifference, nor do I speak of silence as mere absence of sign. Rather, I refer to silence as a form of restraint, a deliberate choice not to speak when our words might do more harm than good, or when speech itself becomes, in a sense, the lesser part. In our world, speech has become cheap. Words pour forth from us with reckless ease, and yet we are often unaware of their weight. We forget that a well-timed silence can hold more power than the most eloquent speech. Today, I will speak of 5 situations where silence, rather than speech, may be the highest expression of wisdom. These moments of silence are not born from weakness or passivity, but from a deep understanding of the human condition and the consequences of our words. Number 1. When words might harm others. It is no secret that our tongues are dangerous weapons. An unkind word, a careless remark, or an impulsive outburst can inflict wounds that far outlast the moment. It is in these times that silence becomes an act of mercy. You see, when we are tempted to speak harshly, to criticize, or to gossip, we must ask ourselves, what do we truly gain by voicing such words? And more importantly, what does the other person lose? There is an old saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But I think we all know deep down that this is a comforting lie. Words can cut deeper than any knife, and the scars they leave are often unseen, but no less real for that. In the heat of anger or frustration, our first instinct may be to lash out. And yet I submit to you that in such moments silence can be the higher path. The silence I speak of here is not one of cowardice or suppression, but of discernment and grace. It is a silence that holds back the impulse to wound another, a silence that acknowledges the fragility of the human heart. When tempted to speak ill of another, pause and consider, will my words build up or tear down? Will they heal or harm? If the answer is the latter, then silence is the kinder choice. It is better to hold your tongue than to speak words that can never be taken back. Number 2. What? 2. When you don't fully understand the situation. There is perhaps no greater folly than to speak authoritatively on matters we do not fully understand. And yet, how often do we find ourselves doing just that? We live in an age where everyone seems to have an opinion on everything, regardless of their actual knowledge or expertise. But my friends, let us not confuse the noise of many voices with the presence of wisdom. To speak when we are ignorant of the facts, or when we lack a true understanding of the complexity of a situation, is to invite error and confusion. Worse still, it is to spread misinformation and half-truths which can lead others astray. In such moments, silence is not only prudent, but necessary. You see, there is a kind of arrogance in assuming that our initial impressions are always correct, or that we are capable of fully grasping every situation at first glance. The world is far more complex than our limited minds can sometimes comprehend, and it takes humility to admit that we do not know everything. In the face of uncertainty, silence is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. It is far better to remain silent and learn than to speak prematurely and reveal our ignorance. When we do not fully understand a situation, our silence allows space for reflection, for gathering information, for listening to those who might have a clearer view. And once we have gained that understanding, then and only then should we speak. Number 3. In the presence of grief or deep suffering. There are few things more painful than witnessing the suffering of another. Whether it is the grief of a loved one lost, the agony of a broken relationship, or the despair that comes from some deep personal wound, suffering is a universal experience. And when we encounter it in others, our natural inclination is to offer comfort through words. We want to say something, anything that will make the pain a little more bearable. But here, again, silence may be the wiser course. For in the face of deep suffering, words can often feel hollow and insufficient. No matter how well-intentioned they may be, Our attempts to offer explanations or platitudes often fall short of the reality of the pain before us. Indeed, words can sometimes even make the suffering worse, as they attempt to explain what is, in essence, inexplicable. In such moments, silence can be a gift. It can be the acknowledgement that there are no easy answers, no quick fixes, no words that will make everything right. Silence allows us to simply be present with those who are grieving, to share in their pain without the pressure of trying to solve it. And let me add, this silence in the face of suffering is not the same as indifference. On the contrary, it can be a profound expression of empathy. To sit in silence with someone who is hurting is to say, "I see your pain, and I am here with you." It is a form of communion that transcends words, a way of showing love that does not require speech. Number 4. 4. When listening is more valuable than speaking. One of the most overlooked virtues of silence is its ability to create space for listening. In our eagerness to share our thoughts and opinions, we often forget that true understanding comes not from speaking, but from listening. And yet, how many of us are truly good listeners? We live in a world that prizes assertiveness and self-expression. We are encouraged to speak our minds, to voice our opinions, to make ourselves heard. But in our haste to do so, we often fail to listen to others. We hear their words, but we do not truly listen. We are too busy preparing our next response, too eager to jump in with our own point of view, to fully absorb what the other person is saying. Silence in this context is the key to good listening. It allows us to put aside our own agendas and focus entirely on the person before us. It gives us the space to truly hear them, to understand not just their words, but the meaning behind them. And let me tell you something else: when we listen in silence, we often learn far more than we would by speaking. We gain insights that we might have missed, perspectives that we had not considered. Silence allows us to engage with others on a deeper level, to connect with them in a way that speech alone cannot. If we wish to be wise, we must learn to be silent in order to listen. For it is in listening that we gain the knowledge and understanding that can guide our own speech when the time comes to speak. Number 5. 5. When facing temptation to brag or show off. Lastly, I would speak of silence in the face of pride. We all know the temptation to boast, to draw attention to our own achievements, to make ourselves appear more important or impressive than we truly are. It is a temptation that is as old as humanity itself, and one that we all, at some point or another, fall prey to. But here, too, silence is a great ally. For when we are tempted to brag or show off, silence can be the most powerful antidote to pride. It is a reminder that our worth does not come from the approval of others, nor from our ability to impress them with our accomplishments. True humility, after all, is not thinking less of ourselves, but thinking of ourselves less. There is a quiet strength in choosing not to speak when we could easily draw attention to ourselves. It is a form of self-discipline, a way of keeping our ego in check. Silence in the face of pride allows us to focus on what truly matters, rather than getting caught up in the superficial need for recognition. And let us not forget, when we remain silent in such moments, we often find that the need to boast fades away. We realize that the satisfaction we sought through words was fleeting and shallow, and that there is far greater peace and quiet humility. In closing, I would remind you that silence is not a passive act, but an active choice. It requires wisdom, patience, and self-control. There are times when words are necessary, when speech is a duty, and when remaining silent would be a grave mistake. But the situations I have spoken of today, when words might harm, when we lack understanding, when we face suffering, when listening is needed, and when pride tempts us, are moments where silence can be the highest expression of love, wisdom, and grace. So, let us not be afraid of silence. Let us embrace it as a tool for discernment, a shield against harm, and a means of cultivating deeper understanding. In a world that is increasingly noisy, may we learn to value the power of well-chosen silence. For in silence, we often find the space to hear what truly matters. Thank you. Thank you.